Hi, my name is Anita Ramsetty. I'm a physician at Englewood Health. My subspecialty is in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism, and I also work as our Director of Health Equity. Today I'm filming at our Shirvan Family Live Well Center in this beautiful teaching kitchen, and we're here to talk about fats. Fats get a bad rap, so the first thing I want to say is that fats are not your enemy. Fats do a lot of really good things for us. They insulate us, which is often a joke that people have fat, but that's actually a good thing. It keeps your body at a temperature where it's supposed to be. Fats make up a lot of the chemicals that do good things for you. They're part of the hormones that run your system. They're part of a lot of different things that make your body run correctly, and so that's actually really important. Fats are an energy source. That's really what our food does. It runs our body the way it should, and fats are a great energy source. And on top of all of that, fats actually tell you when to stop eating. So it's an interesting thing. But if you eat meals that have no fat, you're actually more likely to eat more of those meals. So fats work in a way to tell you, okay, you've had enough, time to stop eating. So we can't say all bad things about fats. They actually do really good things for us. So keep that in mind. Now that said, a lot of people aren't sure what fats are. They really are essentially chemicals that are linked up together. There are things called fatty acids and glycerol. You link them together and you get what would be considered sort of like a unit of fat. And you link a lot of those together and that's what it makes up. So you kind of have an idea of what this looks like. I don't love labeling foods good and bad. That is the truth. I think a lot of food has some good roles and some not great roles. That said, there are some fats that are not as good as others, and there's some that are great for you. So we have some really good examples here. Trans fats are something that you may have heard of in the past. They had a lot of news maybe a few years ago, and they are not great for you. So you can find trans fat in a lot of processed food in the grocery store especially. So we have some examples. These muffins look amazing, and I love a good muffin, but processed muffins that you buy in a store often have some degree of trans fats. Trans fats are basically fats that have been changed chemically by the factory that makes the food. And they do that so that the food lasts longer. All food, if you think about food that you make in your own homes, it goes bad at some point, usually within a couple of days. And that's because of what makes up the food, the fats, the protein, all of those other things. And so by changing the fat in the food, they last for a longer time. And that's great if you're selling food in a grocery store. It's not so good for your body, which doesn't like trans fats and doesn't do great things for your blood vessels. So we recommend that you have no trans fat in your diet if you can avoid it, or try to keep it as minimal as possible. The other one that we think of that isn't great for you typically is what's called saturated fat. So if you think about those those little tiny molecules of fat that I talked about, and you link them all really, really tight, like you could wind a blanket together so that it's really, really tight, that's what we think of in terms of saturated fat. And so you can find that often in solid form. The more tightly something comes together, the more likely it's going to be solid at room temperature. And so you'll find examples of that in things like butter, like this here, and lard. Those are solid fats. At room temperature, they're going to be a block of something. And so we don't love those also for our bodies. There are a few forms that aren't necessarily as harmful, but in general, saturated fat's not great. And so you look for that in labels of food that you have. You'll often find it in, again, food that you can sometimes find in a grocery store that's stable because it keeps the food stable for a longer time. So some of our favorite chips, some of our cookies will have some degree of saturated fat. I almost never tell people you cannot have something ever, but if you see that a food has saturated fat in it, I always recommend that you have as little of it as possible, and that is likely to keep you healthier. So same thing with saturated fats that you may cook with. Butter is something that we use often in cooking. Try to minimize that if you can and use a different form. So that will bring us to what sort of fats are probably a lot better for you. In terms of the oils, so again, if it's more liquidy, that's probably going to be better for you instead of the solid form. We love butter in cooking, but if you can replace it with one of these oils, either an avocado oil or an olive oil, that is going to be better for you in terms of your heart, in terms of how healthy your blood vessels are. We also know that a lot of these oils that are liquid at room temperature, so you can swish it around, those are going to be really good for you in terms of even brain function. So it's good for you to try to incorporate those when you're cooking as opposed to solid ones like the butter or the lard, because those are going to be less good for you when you're using it. If you need to, we try to minimize them as possible. One of the recommendations that I sometimes have when I speak with people is, why don't you do half and half? Instead of having the recipe use all butter, why don't you use half of the butter and you replace the other half with a form of an oil? And then you get some benefit without losing the whole integrity of a recipe that you might be using. So something to think about. The big question is, if you're going to look for these healthy fats, where are you going to find them? And thankfully, there's lots of places to find them. Some of my favorite foods, thankfully, all have healthy fats, and hopefully these are some of your favorite foods as well. One of the things that often surprises people is that eggs have healthy fats. We often like to worry about eggs having lots of cholesterol. Eggs do have some cholesterol, but it turns out that when you look at the effect of eggs on our health, it's actually pretty good. So in general, eggs are on the good list. You can keep those there. Others of my favorites are things like avocados. If you like those, that's great. Nuts, seeds, these are great sources of healthy fats in your diet. And then again, some of these liquid forms, these are better for you if you can incorporate them into your cooking or in terms of your diet in general. These are the ones that you want to look for to try to get healthy fats into your diet, which again, are going to do you and your heart really good. So coconut oil is a question I get a lot. And being from the Caribbean, there's a lot of coconut oil in everything. As you can see, coconut oil is solid at room temperature. The jury's out on coconut oil. There are some benefits to it because it's an interesting oil. It's got some other things to it besides only the fat, but it is still solid. So my advice with coconut oil is to use it as sparingly as possible because we don't know if it's going to end up being mostly good for you or not mostly good for you. And this way you can enjoy the flavor that it has and what it brings to you as a benefit, but you'll minimize any potential harm that it could do because again, it is a solid saturated fat. So keep that one in mind. Cautions about all fats. So hopefully I've now convinced you that fats are not all bad and that you can find ways to get this into your diet in ways that will be beneficial to you. That would be great. There is a caution about fats. So I did mention earlier that they are an energy source. Fats are a great energy source. They in fact provide some of the highest amount of energy per little piece of fat for any food that you can get. That also means that they have some of the highest calorie count. And so the dangers that I see people wander into is when they say, these nuts are great. They've got healthy fat for me, they've got fiber, they have lots of good things. So I'm gonna eat some nuts, but it turns into a large bowl of nuts. With all fats, things like avocados and nuts especially that people will often end up eating a lot of, they're tasty, you have to really monitor how much you're eating. So what I recommend for everyone is you have a small bowl of nuts as opposed to having a large bowl of nuts. Or taking multiple handfuls of nuts when you're not sure what you're actually picking up, because the calories add up pretty quickly. And so what you think of as probably a small amount of food might look like a small amount of food, but the amount of calories in that is actually probably a lot higher than you would expect. And so even though you get the benefit of the healthy fats, you then have to be careful in terms of weight gain if you don't want to gain weight, if you've eaten too much of a good thing. So keep that in mind. And in terms of how you actually do this, I have the raw food here for you to look at. This is great, but how do you actually get this into your diet? So, I mean, eggs are an easy one to think about. You can make eggs in lots of different forms. Avocados come in lots of different forms as well, but I try to think of sort of broad scope of how you can actually add these nuts, all of these fats into your diet. So salad toppers are one of my favorite, but that's because I love salad. I'll throw all kinds of stuff on top of my salads. I'll throw nuts on there, I'll throw seeds on there. Works great. I throw avocados in every salad that I think I've ever eaten. That's an easy one. Aside from that, these can also be your mains. Most restaurants now have some version of eggs. They have some version of avocado toast or something along those lines. Dips are a very common way to add healthy fats into a diet. So olive oil dips are things that often are on tables. You'll have other things that are like guacamole is a very common one that people have in restaurants or make at home. That's an easy thing to do. And there you have your healthy fats as well. I should also mention that for people who are looking for mains, there are different types of fish that are also considered healthy fats. We've got some sardines here, which are amazing for that. Salmon is another one that people will often use as a source for their protein as well as healthy fats. And those can make up a main meal for you. And there you have everything that you need right there. The snacks are also an easy one. Small amounts of nuts, small amounts of seeds that are actually pretty filling are great sources of healthy fats, and you can have as snacks throughout your day that will satisfy you and also do really good things for you health-wise. So hopefully now we can take fats off of your naughty list, and you'll be able to include this more in your diet in a way that makes you feel healthful and happy and know that it's doing something good for you. Thank you for listening.